Welcome back to the second part of this course. In this video I'm going to go through CSS with you and try to explain exactly what CSS is, and I'm going to try to tell you what it's used for and what can be done with it. Now hopefully you have seen the previous video, part 1, where I cover HTML5, because that is a prerequisite for this video, so make sure that you have seen it. If you haven't, please go back, check it and come back to this. But we have quite a bit to cover, to be honest. I'm worried that this is going to take an hour plus, so I'm going to try to jump right into it. As you can see, I've got a project or folder called sample project here. So if you could do the same, just create a folder and add a new file into it. Let's call it index.html. As you can see, we're already using HTML. So I'm going to create a boilerplate for HTML by just doing HTML colon 5, which is just an extension that I've added to VS Code from here, extensions, and if I scroll down a bit, you could just type in HTML actually, and you'll find plenty that you can add. For example, this one, or HTML boilerplate right here, a basic HTML boilerplate snippet generator. So you could just install that and that will help you generate a HTML template out of the box. So the first thing we want to cover is what is CSS. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets, and it's basically, did I spell that correctly? Yeah, let's give it a space. So that is basically used to style HTML elements. So in the last video we covered different types of HTML elements like a paragraph, a div, span, etc. And CSS is basically used to style these. So if you wanted to give colors to the paragraphs or the divs, or we wanted to give it a different layout, so we have 3 boxes on one row and 2 on the other, we would use CSS to do that. And the way we add CSS to our HTML file, there's 2 ways. One is to go into the head tag, which we covered previously, and within it we can create a style tag, and that is an opening closing tag again. Within that style tag we can write our CSS. So just to show you this, let's add a paragraph right here, and we're gonna name it, or we're gonna give it a text of I'm a paragraph. I'm gonna save this, and let's just add some styling. So if I type in P to select this paragraph, and then do a open bracket and close curly bracket, and just type in color red just to test it out. I will explain this in a second, but let's try to test this out. As you can see, the text is red, so we have styled this element successfully using this CSS. So that's one way we can add CSS into HTML. The other way is to link a new file. So if we create a new file and name it index.css, and then just copy everything we created here inside the style tag into the index.css, save it, let's close that, and then instead of a style tag we'll do link and then href. This will basically take in the path of the file, so we'll do index.css, and then the attribute that it takes is rel, and we basically just type in style sheet. The type of file is a style sheet. Save that and then refresh again, and as you can see, it's still showing the paragraph in red, so that means the file is being pulled in and the CSS is working. So that's the 2 different ways that you can add it in. You can also, there's actually a third way where you can add inline CSS, but this is not recommended because it makes the code ugly basically. But you could do within the HTML tag, if you just add a space and then type in style equals to quotes color red. And we'll make sure we comment this out so that we don't pull in this red from here. We're testing it from an inline CSS. Try to refresh, it's still working, but this is not a recommended way. I'm just giving you all the options right now, but we're gonna go with, or we're gonna stick with the file option so that we can keep everything separate for now. And I'm actually gonna do what? I'm gonna close this, I'm gonna split the screen so that I can see both files just to make my life easier a bit. Because we're gonna be here for a while. Alright, let's see, where are we gonna start? We're gonna start with the very basic. We're gonna change the body tag. Okay, before I do that, I need to explain how you can write some CSS in your file. You basically need to select the elements that you want to change. So right now we want to change the background of the page right here. Instead of it being white, we want to change it to, let's say, red. So we want to select the body, because we said anything you see in this window, in this browser, is within the body tag. So we do body, the name of the tag, and then open curly brackets, close curly brackets, and everything inside here is basically the styling that is going to be applied. And the way you lay out the styling, it will be a property name and a value right here. And there's a lot of properties that you can use in CSS. I'm going to try to cover as much as I can with you guys. And then I'm going to also link you to a website where you can do a bit of research to find more properties if you like to customize things a bit more. But we want to change the background color right now, so it's as simple as just typing background color with a hyphen and then add the value red. So again, this is the property name, background color, and this is the value that we're giving it. And as you can see, just me typing background color, I can see different properties that can be used. So let's just save that and refresh, and as you can see, we've got the background colors done. So make sure as well that you end each line with a semicolon, otherwise you might face errors and the code won't run as you expect it to. Okay, now what we want to do is move on to adding a picture or an image, a background image. So instead of seeing the color red, we want to see an image in the background. Do I have any images to use here? I'm not too sure. I'm gonna have to check. Let's try to. Actually, you know what? So that you can follow through, I'm gonna get an image from a website, lorem image. Go here and pull this link. Then go back and paste it into here. So this should pull the link in, and let's try and just save this and check it out. As you can see, it has pulled the link in, or the image from that link, but it's being repeated over and over again. If I refresh, it'll show us another image, but it's being repeated 100 times. So what you want to do is you can go and type in background, as you can see, background repeat right here with a hyphen in between again, and you can do no repeat, and this will stop it from repeating. It will only show once, but now as you can see, it's not filling the page. So for it to fill the page, what we can do is background, we can do background size. And as you can see, you have different values for this. Auto contain cover. We want to cover the page with it. If you refresh, it's being covered completely, but because the image itself is 20 by 30 or 200 by 300, sorry, it's very blurred, but that's fine. You can also do contain, which will contain the image in that very small space that you have. Or you can do auto, which will usually default to the image space or the image size, or the space it has within the container. So for example, if that image was inside of a div and the div was 300 pixels wide, then the image would default to that. So that's background image, background repeat, and background size. We also have background position. As you can see, it gives you the description here of what that does, but that basically positions it differently. So let's try, these are the values that we can give it. I'm gonna try left. Okay, let's try right. There you go. You're seeing a difference, and that's basically that, really. Okay, so there's one more, I think, attachment, background attachment, and that basically, this description is not very clear. So let's just, this is usually what I would do if I've forgotten what something means or property. I would go to, let me just Google this again. I would go to CSS W3 schools and then hit on the first link, and then we're looking at backgrounds, and as you can see, we've got background attachments here. Click on that, it'll tell you property specifies whether the background image should scroll or be fixed. Will not scroll with the rest of the page. So basically it tells you, the background attachment property basically tells the browser whether it should stick or it should scroll with the rest of the page. So as you're scrolling, you will scroll as well, or the image will be fixed and it won't scroll with you. So you can definitely try this out. But I'm going to move on to another part. We will use this later, so don't worry. Now what I want to show you is the shorthand. So instead of typing all of these image, repeat, position, attachments, you can do a shorthand where you add each value on the same line. So you start with the color, the background color like red, and then the image that you'd like to add. So I'm going to copy this and add it here, remove the semicolon, and then the repeat, we don't want it to repeat, and then the position. So the position is center. You would usually add the attachments between these two, between the repeat and the position, but we're not using attachment here, so that's fine. But if you did, it would look something like this. So let's refresh that, see if it's still working. That looks fine. So this basically means that we can comment this out and use it like this, all in one line. So both ways work. It's just a preference, really. So I think that's that for background images and background colors. I'm going to move on to a part that's a bit more important than this, which is the box model that CSS has. And for this, I'm going to go to box model right here to try and explain it better. So basically, as you can see right here, you've got it says in CSS the term box model is used when talking about design and layout. And as you can see here, we have a box where the content is in the center, and around the content you have padding, and around the padding you have border, and outside of that you have a margin. So these are the things that we're going to look at now, and I'm going to try to show you this within the code. So I'm going to change this P to a div, and I'm going to open and close it, and inside this div I'm going to add, let's say I'm div number 1, and then I'm going to add another div outside, and I'm going to say I'm div number 2. Now if you wanted to select these divs, you could just write a div here and then that will select all the divs, but maybe you just want the first div or you want this specific div. The way you would do that is you would give it a class. So in the HTML you would add an attribute called class, and then give it a name. So let's say div1, and we'll give this a class div2. And now if you wanted to select this in the CSS, we would do div, basically a dot for class, and then div1 and dot div2. So this will select this right here, and div2 would select div2 right here. You can also add a selector using an ID. So we could have a div3, I'm div number 3 right here, and here we've used ID instead of class, and the way you would call it or select it here would be using the hashtag and then div3. Now just to show you that this is actually working, I'm going to do color red, which just changes the text color. I'm going to do color gold for div2 and color green. You don't have to do this, but I'm just showing you. You can always try it out if you like, but I'm just trying to explain to you the class selection right here. So I'm going to save this and try to refresh. Let's close all this out. And let's comment out the background for a second because we don't need that. And we need to make sure we save our HTML. And then we refresh. Let me just zoom in a bit. Should have done this earlier, but hopefully you've been able to see my screen. Even the code needs to be zoomed in, I guess. So as you can see, we've selected div1 and we've colored it red. Div2 is yellow and div3 is green. Okay, so now while we're here, I'm just going to right click and get into the console using inspect. And if you just click on this, I'm using Google Chrome, and if you click on select an element to inspect it at the top left here, and then just look at these different boxes. So this is basically the box model that was being mentioned earlier, and this is what CSS uses. As you can see, this highlighted area is the box, and inside of it is the content. Above the content is the padding, and above that is the border, and above that is the margin. So if you look at this box down here, you'll see that if we just select div1 and then look at this, this is the content. This will be the padding outside of it, and then the border is outside of that, and the margin is outside of that. So now if you wanted to give some padding to this div number 1, we would go in to div number 1 and add padding, let's say top. So we want to give it a padding top of 20 pixels. This will basically give it a spacing at the top by 20. So if you just check right here, you'll see this new highlighted green area, which simply gives it a padding of 20. And here you can actually see 20 has been added. Let's try to give 20 to all sides. You could do padding right 20, padding bottom 20, and padding left 20, but we're not going to do that. The shorthand for this is just padding 20. The way you could use the shorthand is to, if you had different values, you would have I believe this is top left, top right, bottom left. Let me just confirm that because I sometimes get this mixed up. If I go to padding, should be padding somewhere here. They have a shorthand, and this shorthand is basically, let's see, it'll be here somewhere. Top right, bottom left, like I said. So you will have 4 different values. You'll have the top value at the start, followed by the right, and then we'll do 10 for the bottom and 10 for the left, and we'll just check that out. We've got top 20, right 20, bottom 10, left 10. If you were to remove 2 of these, what will happen is that it will apply the top 20 and the right 20, and then the bottom doesn't exist, so it will take the top and use that again. So you'll have 20 for the bottom and 20 for the left, because there's nothing defined there. So as you can see, we've got 20, 20, 20, 20. If I change this to 10, you've got top 20, right 10. That means bottom will be 20 and left will be 10. Bottom will be 20 and left will be 10. That's fine. Now if you have the same value across all sides, which is what we wanted to do, you can just type in 20 and then it will fill the blanks for you. Hopefully that is clear, but it will become clearer the more you practice it, so don't worry about that. Div 1, 20, 20, 20. Now as you can see, we've added the padding. Now what we want to do is add a border so that things are a bit clearer. We'll add a border right here, and we'll give it a width of 1 pixel and a solid type, and we'll give it a color of, let's say, red again. And as you can see, we have the border outside of the padding. So the padding is the closest to the content. The content is here, the padding is this white space, and then the border here, and then the margin is outside. So if you wanted to space this div from this second div, you would add some spacing using the margin, because the margin is the furthest out, if that makes sense. So let me just show you an example. Again, the margin can be added as top, bottom, left, right, but we're going to use the shorthand and we're going to do margin 10. Now you'll see that it will space out this right here by 10. The orange space or the orange highlight is the margin. And again, if you click on div 1, look at this box. This box down here will show you 10 on each side for the margin. And this is the space outside of the border. And the space inside of the border is padding. So just remember that outside the border is margin, inside of the border is padding. Usually the padding is used to space the content, and the margin is used to give space between different containers or elements. So that's the margin and the padding. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to try to just add some padding and margins to all of them. So if we copy and paste this here and paste it here, but instead we only want to have a top margin. We don't want margin on the left or the right, so we're just going to give it 0 for the margin, and then just have a look at it. As you can see, again, we've got space in between each one now. So this div has spacing at the bottom, this div has spacing at the top and the bottom, this div has space at the top and the bottom as well. Let's just click on div 3 and have a look at that down here. As you can see, we've added margin top and bottom, but the sides are 0. Alright, so that's paddings, margins, and borders. The border is basically the width, the type, so you can add, or you can try doing dotted instead of solid for the border, and you will get this dotted style. So this is the type of border that you'd like, and this is the color. So width, type, and color. There's different types or styles for borders. We can check the values here. You've got dashed, dotted, double, groove. Let's try dashed. For some reason I like to use a shorthand just because we said dash, sorry, just because it's easier to type. There you go. So there's different ones, you can just play around with it. Another way of writing this line right here would be to do border, style, dashed, border, color, red, border, width, 1, but nobody has time for that. so we just use this. One more thing I'm gonna mention while we're doing border is border radius. Not bored, I am bored though, but border radius, let's give it a pixel, a 10 pixel. What this will do is basically turn the corners from being sharp to curved or curved. So let's say 5 pixels, let's give it 5 pixels instead. You see the difference. If you give it 50%, it'll be more like a circle, or at least it'll try to emulate a circle as much as it can. But that's what border radius does. Again, border radius can be defined as border bottom left radius, border top left radius, border bottom right. No one has time for that though. So if you just give it one value, it will apply that to all corners. Otherwise, you can give it 4 values: top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, or maybe top left, top right, bottom left. Yeah, I think that's correct. So again, I'll just go with the shorthand, make things easy. I think that's it for borders. There is one more thing I'd like to say on margins though. Let's say we give this div1 a width, which is another property you can give to define the width of a element. So let's say we give it a width of 300 pixels, right? Now you will see that this div right here has a width of 300, just as we defined it. Let's change it to 200 actually. You'll see that it's shrink down to 200, and what we want to do now is just center this div. So how would we do that? Well, you could do margin auto for the sides. So instead of 0, we'll just give it auto, and that should center it. And if you have a look at this, you'll see that it's given the div the same amount of margin on both sides. In that way, it's managed to center it by just setting it to auto. That's it for margins. It's quite straightforward, to be honest, once you get the concept, but it does take a second to just make a bit more sense, and that's fine. You'll get used to it, don't worry. Just like we have the ability to add width, you can also choose the height for an element. So that's another property, height. Let's give this a height of 400 pixels just to try it out. There you go. Well, that is quite big. Let's change it to 200. And as you can see, we've changed that. What else do we have? We also have max width. So the maximum width you'd want this div to ever be. So we don't want it to ever be more than 500, for example. And you also have min width. We're going to set this to 500 pixels. If we just check this out, you'll see that the minimum width is 500. So it's literally going to just disregard this width, because now the minimum width that it will ever be is 500. So if you just have a look at this, you'll see that it's 500. And let's remove this because we don't need it anymore. If we change the min width to 400 instead, and just maybe 300, and try to resize the window, you will see that it will keep moving, it will keep shrinking until it reaches 300, and then it will literally just stay that way. And now you have to actually scroll to see the content. So that's what min width would do. And the reason it's this big is because it's taken the max width. So by default, it's on 500. And it will not go higher than that. Hopefully that's clear. I think it's straightforward. You also have min height and max height for the same thing. So I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to remove all of this. Actually, let's keep max width and min width as well, but we might just comment them out because we don't need them. One more thing as well I'd like to show you is the opacity. So let me just pull up the image again that we had so that I can try and demonstrate the opacity, which basically sets the transparency of a element. So it has a value from 0 to 1, 1 being visible and 0 being transparent. So we're going to set it to 0.5, save that and just view it in the browser. Let's change it to 0.1. What's happening is actually the body where the opacity is being set as transparent. So as you can see, this is barely visible because the body, the tag body, which has all the content, I'm div 1, div 2, whoops, this should have set 2, div 3, has been set to 0.1. It's all in the body. If I was to change that to 0.9, you'll see that it all appears. So the image itself is not being affected, but the body content is. So you can do that across, for example, div 1. If I comment this again and remove this and change this to background color, you can add a background color with opacity as well. So we can use RGBA, which is a different form of color, or a different way of defining a color. So we've got, I think this is black, but we want it to be transparent. So the last value will be the transparency or opacity. So we've given it 0.5. Usually the color will look like this, but when you set the transparency to 0.3, for example, or 0.1, you'll see the difference. You can barely see the black. So that is the transparency, and you can usually set that with opacity, and the values are from 0 to 1. So just keep that in mind because that will definitely come in handy. Okay, that's it for this part. We're going to move on to the text and how to manipulate the text. So for this, I'm going to create a few paragraphs. I'm going to comment the divs out, and we're going to have I'm para 1, I'm para 2, I'm para 3 for now. And before we get to the paragraph, actually, I'm just going to show you a quick thing with background colors. There's another way you can also express the color using, down here we've used RGBA, but you can also use linear gradient, if I can spell it correctly, gradient, I think. And then in parentheses you would choose the color that you want it to go from to. So let's say red and yellow, and just have a look at that, what we get. We've commented out the divs, so maybe we can comment these out for now too, and remove the max. Okay, so all I've done is just remove the max width, min width, and commented these out. So let's just have a look at the background color. That is not showing up. I must have done something wrong. I think you have to set it as background, not background color, sorry. So let's refresh, and as you can see, you've got the linear from red to yellow. Let's say we want to do it from left to right. Can I do to right? I think I can. There you go. It's going from left to right. I can do to left, of course, and you can just play around with it and test it. And you can also do, for example, the rainbow colors. which would be I think is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, I think. And we want it to be to right, so from left to right. Maybe just have a look at that. There you go. That looks good. So that's another thing that I wanted to just mention. You can set colors by just typing blue, for example, or you can add in the RGBA with the alpha right here being the opacity, or you can do linear gradient. There's also another one called, I'm going to keep this commented out in case you want to copy them down. There's another one called radial gradient, and this is more like a circle, so we'll add circle, and then the colors we want, we'll just add yellow, green, red, yellow, green, and have a look at that, and you can see there's 3 different circles. But you could play around with that as well and just test out different values. You also have conic gradient, and this will just take in the colors. So let's just try orange, green. These are just random colors that I'm putting in. Let me put a few more colors actually so that I can see what is it doing. What else do you have? Pink. Okay, I'm not sure what this really does, but as you can see, it just creates this effect that for one reason or another you might need. So it's good to know. These are the different types of gradients you have: linear, radial, conic. I'm going to comment them out, keep them there. But we're going to go back to our paragraphs and try to manipulate the text. Okay, so we've got this paragraph and it's taking up this space, and we want to center this text. What do? We do paragraph to select all the paragraphs, and then do text align center. That will center the text to the center. You can also do say you have a longer paragraph. So if I go lorem ipsum enter and just take some of this text and then go to, oops, go back here, copy it into a new paragraph, let's say, and then just have a look at that. As you can see, we've got this paragraph. There's a property called, excuse me, text align last, which will, content on the affected line is aligned per text align unless text align is just justify, in which case it's okay. That is just messy. What it does is it just aligns the last line in the text. So if you do right and check the last line, you'll see that the last line has a line to the left, or the right, sorry. I don't know what kind of explanation that was, but that's all that does. That is terrible. Direction, the direction, if we add direction here, that is a huge explanation. But basically left to right direction and right to left direction. So if I want to change the text from right to left, I can do this and it should change it to right to left. So for example, if you're writing in a language that writes from right to left, like Arabic for example, you would use something like this. Otherwise the default is left to right, which is fine. I just want to check, if I was to remove this, do I see any difference? There you go. You can actually see the text going from right to left because we moved, or we've commented out the center align. So it's no longer aligning to the center, it's following the direction from right to left or left to right. Hopefully that's clear. We also have something called vertical align. I say we as if I own this language, but CSS has a vertical align, and these are the values, the possible values, and it basically aligns the text right here vertically. So it could be, let's say the line is right here, it will be relative to that line. So if you choose, for example, let's look at the values, middle or top, it will basically move it up or down a bit according to that line. You also have baseline, so baseline will drop it straight to that line. This is usually more visible when you're when you've got text in a table and then you want the text to align to that row. You'll be able to see it then. But if you ever need to align the text vertically, you can always use vertical align. You can also do text decoration. You can decorate the text to have, for example, underline, something like this, or you can have the line through the text, line through. Not sure what other values they have, but these are the two that I usually use. Dotted. What is that? Okay, it's nothing. Double. I think that's 2 underlines. No? Overline. Okay. Wavy. Interesting. Well, this is a short form for a few properties. So it would be the equivalent of, let's just close this off or comment it out. Decoration line, decoration, text decoration color, text decoration style, and text decoration thickness. So all of that can be defined under one line right here. So we've got line, and we'll do underline for now. Color, you can do, what color are these? Black. So we'll do red. Style, I think the dotted and the double was here, so we'll do double. And this should underline it twice. Thickness, what can I give you? Pixels? Let me try 3 pixels. Okay. Change it to 1. Interesting. Well, let's try, what else do we have? Dashed, right? We have dashed. I see. To be honest with you, these are things that I don't actually use at work, so I'm just trying them out with you guys. Usually I just use underline or line through sometimes, but that's it. Anyway, that's that. You can also do text transform. Transform to turn the text into capitals, or this is just capitalizing the first letter of every word. You can also do uppercase to turn everything into capitals, or lowercase to turn everything into small characters. Another property that I'd like to just go through quickly when it comes to text is the text overflow, which is a property that, as you can see, prevents the text from being wrapped. So the values that you can have for this are clip, ellipsis, and this is usually, for example, if you have a container and the div is, or the container is around, let's say 50 pixels wide, but the text is about 200 pixels wide. A lot of the text is not going to be fitted in that small container, so this would just add three dots at the end of the container. It would have, let's say, maybe 20 letters from the entire text, and then 3 dots at the end to indicate that there's more for you to see. And for you to do that, you can add the text overflow, and then you can also add something called white space and do a no wrap, and overflow will be hidden. So just to show you what these three do together, and then I'll break it down one by one. But if I go here and just try to refresh, you'll see that it will cut down the entire paragraph into just one line with 3 dots in the end, just to make sure that it all fits in. So there are instances where you'll need to do this, but it's good to keep that in mind. I'm gonna take this and comment it out and this and comment it out and just have a look at this right now. So as you can see, everything appears as it normally would, but if we give this paragraph a height of, let's say, 100 pixels and try to view it, because of this overflow hidden, you can't actually see beyond the 100 pixels. It will, anything that overflows past that container basically is set to hidden. You can also set it to scroll, so that you can have a scroll here. And is there anything else you can set it to? You can set it to visible, which it is by default. That's pretty much it, really. If we try to let's put this back as it was to hidden, comment it out and look at white space. Now white space, what white space does when it's set to no wrap, if I comment it out and just show you it without any white space set, you can see the entire text. But if we set it to white space no wrap, it will literally not wrap the text, so it will just continue in one line. So when you combine these three together, you get something like this. And I found this to be very handy. So if you want to take note of that, feel free. I'm going to comment it out. There's also a text indent, which I believe indents the text to, let's say, can I give it 20 pixels and check? It just pushes that text 20 pixels in, indents it. You also have text shadow, which is quite commonly used, and this will take the horizontal value, the vertical value, the blur, and the color. So for horizontal, we'll just put 1 pixels, for the vertical 1 pixels, for the blur we'll put 4 pixels, and then the color will be red. And let's just have a look at that. So this is what it would look like if I change the horizontal to 10 pixels. You'll see that it would move along 10 pixels to the right. You can also do minus, it will go to the left. If you do 10 pixels vertically, it will move to the bottom. If you do minus 10 vertically, it will move to the top. And this is just basically the shadow of the text. So let's keep this at 1, 1, and it looks like this. If we change the blur to 1 pixel, it looks a lot more sharper. So you can just keep this at 0 really, and just have it as text that is right behind it, or as shadow that's right behind the text. And we're going to change the blur to say 10, or maybe that's too much, 6 pixels. Okay. And just change this color to gold. Wow. Anyway, I think you get the point. Moving on, we have the font family, which is how you would change the font. Let's set it to Arial. One more. Helvetica. Okay, there's not much difference between those two. Anyway, that's how you set the font. And if you want to set the style of the text to italic, you can use font style. Let's comment that out. Let me just add in font family as well and comment it out. Forgive me if everything is looking a bit messy. There's a lot of comments. I'm trying to keep everything in as much as I can, so that you can take note of it if you need to. You also have font size to change the size of the font, of course. Let's say 100 is too much. Let's say 40 pixels. That's big. Let's say I really need to go take a break. Bold. Let's say font weight bold. Without it, it looks something like this, and then font weight just sets the font to bold or bolder. Let's keep it at bold. We can also add a box shadow, just like the text shadow that we added. So let's try and do this. I'm gonna add a div above the paragraph, and I'm gonna give it a class of, actually we'll keep it classless for now, and just type in I'm a box, and we want to change the font size. I think the font size was too big on this text, so we want to change it to font size, make it maybe 8%. I want it to be really small basically, and we can remove the height as well. We don't need that. And underneath here in the dev or the div selector, we want to add the box shadow, which will take again the horizontal. We'll set that to 0 for now. Vertical 0 as well, and then the blur and the spread. It's easier to show you than to explain this, so I'm gonna just choose any random values, and we'll set this to green, and we'll have a look at it. Did I save the HTML? No, I didn't. Okay, so we've got a box here, and we've got the blur and the spread. If I change the spread to 3 pixels, you'll see that this space over which the spread is applied is a lot smaller now. So this controls how far the spread is being applied. So if I do say 1%, there's very little spread to the shadow. If I do 10% blur, you'll see that the blur has increased. If I do, let's say 1% blur and 1% spread, I think that's quite straightforward. If I change the horizontal to 10 pixels, you'll see that it's moved to the right, and 10 pixels vertically it is going to move down. And the same is true if you do minus, it will move to the left and upwards. But I think that's quite straightforward. The only difference between the text shadow and the box shadow is that one of them takes the spread and the other doesn't. So this is the blur, this is the blur, but this one, the box shadow, takes in a spread as well. So that's that. I think we can move on to doing something called episode classes, and it's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. So I'm going to copy out or comment out the paragraph in the div. In fact, I'm going to remove everything that we've done so far because we're not going to need it. But I'm going to keep the paragraph commented out because we might need the paragraph later, just because it has a lot of text in it. So we're going to create a couple of links, and we're going to link them to Google, google.com, Google. You're going to link this to https://.ly.co.uk. .ly. I think we can work with these two. So the selectors that I wanted to cover right now is some of the episode classes for the links. So we've got A to select the link, and then we give it, usually we just do brackets or curly brackets and then add in the styling. But for episode classes, we add a colon after the A, and then we can use, as you can see, these things have popped up. These are a mixture of episode elements and episode classes. I'm going to explain the difference in a second, but we're starting with episode classes, which is, for example, if you have a link that you have previously visited, it would you could, for example, use a episode class of visited. I'm just looking for it right here, visited. And you can also have a link that you hover over with a mouse, and this episode class can be used on multiple elements and not just a link. You can also have a link where you a link that is active. So once you click on it, it becomes active. At that moment, that same moment that it's clicked on, it becomes active. And you can also have a normal link that has not been visited yet, just by colon link. So let's try this out. A link that has been visited, we want to change the color of it to gold. I don't need this, sorry. A link that is hovered over, we want it to be purple. A link that is active, we want it to be green. And a new link that hasn't been visited yet, we'll do brown. Brown? Yeah, let's do brown, that's fine. So now if we just check this out, and maybe add a new line between both links. So these links are actually showing as if I've already visited them, which I have in the past. For that reason, they're shown as gold. But as you can see, if we hover over a link, it should turn purple. And it is turning purple when I hover the mouse over it. Let's try and add a link that I haven't visited. So I'm going to add ref https nike.com. So keep in mind, when you're looking at this, you might have not visited .ly.co.uk in the past, and because of that, this will actually be colored brown. But for myself, I'm seeing it as gold because I have visited this link before. So let me save this and then refresh. And as you can see, this is shown as brown. Now the only thing left that we need to check is when we target an active link. So a link becomes active when you click on it. So we're just going to click and hold that click to see the color. And as you can see, I've just clicked on Google and it's turning green. I'm going to move away. Click on this, turns green. Click on this. This one doesn't turn green, maybe because it hasn't been visited before. That's strange. If I go back and I click on it, okay. So it looks like this active only works on links that have already been visited or links that don't have a color, a default color. But this is basically what episode class is, where you add a single colon and then as a specific state. So for example, I'll give you more examples. If I go to CSS and then try to go to Episoda class, and then I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a list of all the Episodo, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Episoda classes that can be used. So you can have active for links, checked for input fields that we've done in our previous video for checkboxes. So if a checkbox is checked or not, you can use this, and you can target a checked checkbox using this selector. You've got also first child, so we'll try this first child with a link, or maybe we can create a div, and inside that div we will put all of this. So we've just moved all the links inside this div, and now we want to target the first child, which will be Google. So for this, I'm just going to comment out all of these that we've done, all the styles for the links, and I'm going to add a selector div with a Episoda class of first child, I believe it was, and then open close curly brackets, and then we want to give it a color of, say, actually we want to do, let's increase its font to 40 pixels. Make sure you save the HTML, check the document. It's actually increased the sizes of all the links. If we check this again, first child selects every P element that is the first child of its parent. Okay, so we actually need to change this to A. And now what it will do is select any link that is the first child of its parent. So this div is the parent, and it has 3 children, and they are all links. And this selector will basically pick the link that is the first child of its parent. So if we save this again and then just have a look at this now, you'll see that it actually just picks out the first link, because this link is the first child of its parent. You can also do last child, and that should change it to the last child. What else do we have? And then you have nth child, where you can specify the number of the child. It could be the first, second, or third, etc. And this one we've already done as well, visited. But this is the idea. You can just Google for W3 Schools CSS, and then look for Episoda class on the left side, and it can just show you. You can have a look at the table with all the classes and refer to them at any time. So you don't actually need to memorize all of this. You can always find it online, but it will become part of your muscle memory the more you use it. That's it for the classes, for the Episoda classes. While we're here, we might as well do Episoda elements. Excuse me. So Episoda elements are basically they're similar to classes in the way it's written, but it's more like 2 columns that are added. So let's put a paragraph, 2 columns, and then one of the Episoda elements is first letter. We don't have a paragraph here. I'm going to comment out this div, and I'm going to uncomment the paragraph so that we can test this. Excuse me. So the first letter, we want it to be font size, again, let's do 40. So what this will do is basically select the first letter from all the paragraphs, and we only have 1 paragraph, so it should change the C. It should change the C's font size to 40 pixels. If I save the HTML and CSS and refresh, as you can see, it's done exactly that. And right here, you can also go to Episode Elements and scroll to the bottom. It should show you the different examples. So it's right here. You've got after, before, first letter, first line, marker, selection. So we can go through these. We've done first line or first letter. We can try first line. And we'll just quickly check this, and you'll see that it updates the first line. What else did we have? We had the marker, which sets the marker of list items. So this only works on unordered lists, and it basically affects the bullet points. So if I added some here, and if I added unordered list with some list items within it, 1, 2, 3, and I tried to use the marker episode element and change the color to red, for example. Actually, I need to change this to li, and then if I was to refresh the page, you can see that it's colored the bullet points red. So that's what the marker does. It selects these markers or bullet points. We also had selection, which selects a portion of an element that is selected by users. So let's try that out quickly. If we do paragraph selection, was it? And then do color red, background green. What this should do is when a user comes to the text and tries to select it like this, it should change the background color to green and the text to red. So we'll try it out, and as you can see, it does exactly that. So these persona elements and classes just allow you to select your elements in a different way, and it gives you access to things like the markers and the selections that you wouldn't otherwise be able to select. The last two are after and before, so I'm going to run through these quickly. And say we have a paragraph, right? And we want to add, I'm going to comment all of this out, and we want to add the before and after. This will basically just add, as you can see here, after, insert something after the content of each P, insert something before the content of each P. So here, if you do before, whatever you add here, it will insert before the content or before the paragraph, and anything you insert here, it will insert after the paragraph. So instead of having to create a new element, you can use this method to insert anything into the DOM or into the HTML. So next up we have the list types. So since we were speaking about markers, we might as well cover this now, which is basically, let me just close this up and get rid of this as well. There we go. So we have the UL on the screen. If you wanted to select the UL, let's go to the bottom of the page and add the UL again. And we want to be able to customize the bullets. One way we can do that is to use something called list style type. And the way you would do that is you would select the LIs and you would update the list style type. So let me just remove the UL and select the LI directly. List style type has values like a circle, a decimal, a disk. Let's try Armenian. Armenian, what is that? Oh wow, okay. Let's try decimal. See, some of these I'm actually seeing for the first time. Because I don't really need to use all of this. Let's try disk. Okay, disk is just your standard bullet point. Lower Roman. Wow, okay. Another thing you can do is you can add a list style image. So you can add an image instead of the bullet points or the values on the left. I don't have an image to test with, but feel free to just add a URL and then the image path here with the extension, for example JPG or JPG or PNG, and just check if that works for you. It should. I don't have an image anywhere at the minute, so I'm not going to try that, although I could test with a URL from the internet. Maybe we should do that, although I'm conscious about the time. Lorem image. List style image URL. Okay, obviously the width on these things are too big, the height and the width, so let's try to reduce it a bit, and there you go. As you can see, we've added an image just like that. And you can also do a list style position, which will control whether you will have the bullet points inside or outside the box of the LI. So let's remove this and look at this and see how it looks. If I highlight, you'll see that the bullet points is part of the LI right now, whereas usually if I comment this out, it will be outside. So if I check this out, you see this is the LI and this is outside. As you can see, it's the marker. So that's fine. That's basically it for the list style types, and you can feel free to explore that. Okay, we get into the slightly more interesting parts. I'm going to remove the UL because I don't think we need that anymore. I'm going to comment out the paragraph, and I'm going to remove the div. We're going to need to add a few more divs here. So I'm going to add a class container, and inside of this div I'm going to create 3 other divs, and I'm going to give them a class of box, and just copy paste that 3 times. And I think that's it for now. What I want to test, what I basically want to test is the display property. So I'm going to select container here, dot container for the class, and then set the property display to flex. And this will basically help us to lay out the boxes within the container. I'm going to create the styling for box and then explain that a bit further. So for box, we want to have a width of, say, 50 should do, height of 50 pixels, a background color of red, that should be fine, and then a margin to space it out a bit, a margin of 10 pixels, and that will be 0, 10 pixels. So the top will be 0, the right side will be 10 pixels, bottom will be 0, left side will be 10 pixels. If we just save both files and then check the browser, you'll see that we've got our container with 3 boxes in them. I'm not sure where this green border is coming from, but I would like to remove it. So I'm going to check up here. I think I have the div with the box shadow. Removing that for now. There we go. So if I just click on this element and check the container, you'll see that what Flex has done it's basically spread the contents of the div from left to right. And what you could do is change the flex direction so that instead of it being from left to right, it could be from top to bottom. So let's try a row, or is it column, sorry. And as you can see, it's moved from top to bottom, and the reason why it's all attached is because we gave it no spacing from top to bottom. So let's just change that and put 10 pixels here, which means we don't need that anymore. And as you can see, the space is back. So that's the difference between row and column for the flex direction. You can also do column reverse. So it would be from bottom to top instead of top to bottom, but right now you can't really see the difference because of the colors. But we could make it a bit clearer by giving these extra classes. So we've got green and gold here, and we create these classes right here. These selectors, green will be a background color of green, gold will be a background color of gold, and we'll remove this and create a third one, red, and paste that in here. So now all we need to do is just add red here. Now we have a box that's red, a box that's green, a box that's gold, and things should be a little bit clearer. So now you've got top to bottom red, green, yellow. If you do a reverse, you see yellow, green, red, and the same thing is true for the row and row reverse. Row reverse will take it to the right side, whereas row is from the left side. So that's flex, and you can also use, if you wanted to center the contents in this div, you can do justify content center, and that should center it or align it horizontally to the center. If you want to align it horizontally or align it vertically, sorry, to the center, you would do align items center, and that would align it to the center. So if I gave the container a height of 100 VH, which is the entire page, it will center it to the middle because of this right here. So if I remove this, it will go back to the top. If I add this, it will center it to the middle. So just remember that when you use a display flex, if you want to center things horizontally, you use this. If you want to center things vertically, you use this. Sometimes you will also use align self, which pretty much does the same thing, but it aligns a single item instead of multiple items like align items does. So that's display flex. You also have display grid, and what grid does, let's create a new one right here. We're going to create a new div and call it class grid so that we can just demonstrate this quickly. In this grid we'll have 3 different divs, each one being a box again. Shall we do that? Let's try something different actually. Let's just have some text in it. How about that? First div, second div, and third div. Now we want to select the grid using a dot grid selector, and then open curly brackets and close, and then we want to do a display grid, and then we just need to define the template that we want it to display as. So the template of the grid, whether we want it to display the grid from left to right or top to bottom, and the spacing within the grid for each item. So to define that, we'll use something like grid template columns, and we'll give it a 1FR, which stands for 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 1 fraction. So the first div will have 1 fraction of the space, second div 1 fraction of the space, third div or third row 1 fraction of the space. If we save both of these files and refresh, we need to actually get rid of this 100 height, and as you can see, we have a grid with 3 different columns, and each column is taking the same amount of space. This is 1 fraction, 2 fractions, or 1 fraction here and 1 fraction here. Another shorthand for writing the same thing would be repeat 1FR3, I believe. It might be the other way around, I'm not too sure. I think it's the other way around actually. 3, 1FR. Maybe. I'm gonna try it. Yep, I think that's it. Let me check. That looks fine. So what this does is basically it repeats this 3 times, which is the equivalent of 1FR, 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 like we did. If I was to change this to 2, for example, you'll see that this will go to a new line. So it's created a grid where this is 1 fraction. In the second column is also 1 fraction, and then it goes down to the next row where it has a column with 1 fraction and another column with 1 fraction. And you can make these grids as wide and as long as you want them, and as complex as you want them. So the difference between display flex and display grid is display flex is usually for 2-dimensional layouts, whereas display grid can be for 3-dimensional layouts, so it can be a lot more complex when it comes to using layouts with grid. You can also do the same thing for rows if you wanted to, and have them display in that same fashion from top to bottom. But we'll get into that in another video, because we will actually try to create a website together, and we will also try to clone a website, or a random website that we pick from the internet together. So we will have to use these things, but for now I just want you to understand the different properties that are available at your disposal when using CSS. So display has multiple values, flex and grid being 2 of them. I'm going to cover a few more right now. The next one I'd like to cover is display. I'm thinking, should we do another box for this? Let's do that. Let's do HR to keep these separated from each other. And we'll create a div class block this time. So that's another value for display. And we'll create another block, but this time we name it block 2, and a third div with a class of inline, and a fourth div with a class inline 2. Okay, and we'll just give them some text within it. I'm a block div. I'm also a block div. I'm an inline div. I'm also an inline div. Alright. So moving down, we select the block and we give it a display block, and we can actually select both the block and the block 2. So we just separate it by a comma, block 2, and down here we'll do inline and inline 2, basically applying this styling to both these classes. And here we want to give display the value of inline or inline block, and I'm gonna try to demonstrate the difference between these two right now. So as you can see, we've got a div right here that has a display block, and it's taken up the entire space from left to right. And you've also got another block that's doing the same thing, whereas here the inline block is only taking the amount of space it needs, so there's no white space. And the same thing is true for this as well. So you can already see the difference between these two, inline and block and inline block. Now there is one more difference between the two that I wanted to highlight, and that difference is basically with inline block you have more customizability, if you like. So you can actually set the margin and the padding and the width for an element that has a display block. So here we could set a width of say 100 pixels. I missed the semicolon in here, and we can also add a margin of 20 pixels. But if I was to add a third div, named it inline only, I am an inline only div, these should really say inline block. So let's just change that. And then inline only, we come here and select it and do a display inline, and then try to do a div or width, sorry, give it a width of 100 pixels and a margin of 20. Now as you can see, we've just selected these two divs, inline and inline 2 and inline only. Both of them have similar styling, except for the display. One is inline block and one is inline. So let's see if this actually works, and let's see what doesn't work. So I'm looking at this and I can see this has a margin, this has a margin, and this doesn't have the same kind of margin. So here we added a margin of 20 for every side, but for some reason on the inline you don't see that 20 being applied on the top and the bottom. And I'm sure if you added padding it would be the same issue. And in terms of the width as well, the width doesn't seem to be 100 here. So here if you look at the number above, you see it's 100 by 37, so it's respecting the width that we've given it, and this is the inline block. Whereas the inline only, it does not respect the width that we've given it or the margin that we've given it. So that's the main difference as well between these two, inline block and inline. Whereas block respects all the stylings that's given to it, and it's usually covering the entire line. Okay, that was quite a bit. There is also one more, and that is display none. So that will just hide or remove the div from the page, so you'll no longer be able to see it. There you go. There's one more as well called visibility hidden, which is similar to display none, but let's just check. There you go. With visibility hidden, it still maintains the spacing, so it takes up the spacing even though you can't see it. Whereas with display none, this spacing is taken away as if it's not part of the DOM. So if I just show you this again, change this to none, you see that this moves up because it assumes that it's empty. But with visibility hidden, you'll see that the item is actually taking up space. It affects the layout even though it's not shown. So that's the main difference between display none and visibility hidden. This one will affect the layout, whereas this one doesn't affect the layout. Okay, we also have, and this is quite interesting, for this one I'm gonna have to create a HR so that we can separate and start fresh. Do a div class. We've already used container above, so let's do wrapper. And inside of this wrapper, we'll do a div class box1. Excuse me. And box2. So two divs, box1 and box2, sitting inside a div with class wrapper. Now we want to select the wrapper and give it a position of relative. And this is a new property that we haven't come across yet. So I'll be explaining this for the next few minutes. Position relative. And then we want to select box 1 as well as box 2. Actually, let's do it one by one. Box 1, position relative again. And we want to give box 1 a border so that we can see what's happening. And we also want to give the wrapper a border. 1 pixel. I was just thinking I should have given the previous divs borders as well when I was explaining the grid and the flex box, but maybe I can go up and do that later. For now though, let's continue. 1 pixel solid, let's do green, and finally box 2, position relative, border. I'm just gonna copy this because it's around 5 AM right now. And I'm trying to get off the computer. Let's just have a look at this. Do we see anything? I didn't save the HTML. There we go. Let's give each box a height of 50 pixels, maybe 100. 100 height and 100 width. How about that? Copy and paste it. And we should see something like this. And I'm going to give the wrapper actually a height of 500 so that we have some space to work with. Now, as you can see, what position does is basically position the elements around the page according to the positions that you've given it. So you can choose a position. You can choose from values between absolute, fixed, relative, static. Relative is relative to the parent. So right now the wrapper is a child of the body. So the position of wrapper is relative to the body. Whereas the box 1 and box 2's position is relative to its parent, which is wrapper. Okay, so to help you understand this a little bit better, I'm going to add some positioning to box 1. So box 1 will move to the left around 100 pixels. So now when box 1 moves to the left, it's going to move to the left by 100 pixels relative to the wrapper. So if we refresh this, you see that it's moved 100 pixels from the left relative to the green border. And if I do top, it will move from top to bottom relative to the green line again, 100 pixels. Same thing if I do right, it's going to move right to left. And if I do bottom, I think these are cancelling each other out at the minute, that's why it's not moving. But you get the idea. Let me just show you again. If I do that, it takes it to the top. It goes from bottom to top by 100 and then right to left by 100. So you either do left and top or right and bottom. If you do both, they will just cancel each other out. So that is basically what relative is. It's setting the position of the element relative to its parent. And then you have absolute. Absolute is basically where you set the element, you set the element's position to absolute. Do we have an explanation for it? I guess we don't. This is basically saying that if we want it to have its own position, basically relative to the page itself. So if I go up here, let me just check the code, make sure I didn't do anything silly. We want to keep this relative. You want to change box 1 to absolute. Okay, so we want to comment these two out and just have a look at this right now. Now, as you can see, the red has actually disappeared. I don't see no red. Box 1 has disappeared. So when you give it a position absolute, you need to actually give it a direction, whether it's left, top, right, or bottom. So let's say we want it to the bottom. We give it a bottom 0, refresh, scroll to the bottom, you'll see that it's in the bottom right now. You can do the same using right instead, and you find it to the right. And this is basically saying we want it to have its own position within the parent. And for you to achieve this, you need to make sure that the parent is set to relative, and then within it you can set the child to position absolute. So basically the child will now have its own position, but it will always remain inside the parent. If we remove this position relative from the parent, you'll see that this right now will have any position relative to the whole page. So as you can see, it's already gone out from the box because right now it doesn't care about the parent anymore. The parent is not set to position relative, so then this position absolute means it's a position absolute to the entire page. But if you set position relative to the parent, the child that is set to position absolute is gonna respect the parent's boundaries but still have its own position, if that makes sense. Again, this comes with practice. It will make more sense once you try to implement it, but just try to remember that position relative usually positions the element relative to its parent. Position absolute gives you the freedom to position yourself as you wish. And if your parent is relative to the page, then even though you're absolute, you will be confined by your parent's boundaries, if that makes sense. Okay, that was quite a bit again. I think we have a couple more things to go through and then we're done. Z-index. Let's do Z-index. How do I demonstrate Z-index the quickest way? Well, we have box 1 and box 2, right? Should I keep these just in case? Let me just keep them. I'm going to comment this out in case you need it. What I'm going to do is take this link again for the images, copy, and just add it to both of these boxes as an image. So background image, I think this should work for what I want to test out. Background image URL, and let's just have a look at that quickly. Okay, that looks fine. Now what we want to do is we want to set this as absolute and then do top 0 and make sure that the parent is relative. Oops. We want to make sure that the parent is relative or positioned to relative. And then now you'll see that the elements are actually overriding each other. So one is on top of another. And this is where z-index comes in. Z-index basically allows you to choose which element is going to be on top of the other using the value, the order that you set it in. So for example, right now, V2 or box 2, sorry, V2, box 2 is above box 1, but we want it to be the other way around. So we want box 1 to be on top of box 2. And we do that by setting box 1 z-index to -1. Or maybe it's the other way around, because the one with the bigger number is usually on top. So box 2 now is the smaller number, and as you can see, box 1 is now on top, because by default z-index is 1, I believe. So -1 is smaller than 1, and so box 1 is on top. But that's it with z-index. It's literally just choosing the stack order. The next thing I want to cover is overflow. I'm going to have to go to lorem ipsum again. Just Google that to get some text. And we've touched on overflow previously, but if we add a paragraph or maybe a div instead and paste that into there, and then give that a class of just a story for now, and then we select that class story and give it a height of 100 and a width of 100, and we do overflow x scroll, overflow y hidden, and just see what that gives us. As you can see, you've got the text right here, and we've got overflow y, which is top to bottom, as hidden, so we actually can't scroll up or down, but we can scroll right to left, I believe. We should be able to anyway, maybe because of the width that we've given it. Let's just check. Scroll y, overflow hidden. You should be able to scroll right to left, but for some reason I can't seem to scroll, which is strange. Let's try overflow scroll instead, so you can scroll both sides. Okay, the reason why you couldn't scroll to the right is because that was the maximum width. So let me change that to 300. Yeah, I think you would need to add some sort of wrapping so that the text doesn't go to the new line but continues along. So that's fine. But basically what I'm trying to get at here is that overflow can be separated into overflow y and overflow x, or just grouped into overflow like this. And the values that you have are basically hidden, scroll. Hidden will hide anything that is overflowing beyond that box. So the box is this big, and anything below it is overflowing, so it won't be shown. But excuse me, if you set it as scroll, you'll be able to scroll up and down to see your overflown content. Usually you can control this with X and Y as well. to control X and to control Y, but because we set the width, it's not working as intended, because the text is just going from top to bottom. But that's it for overflow. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well was float. So if I added an image here, if we just take this for now, copy it, and add an image, shall we say inside the div that we just created with a class story? Let's do that. Let me just clean this up a bit. It's starting to look very messy. This should be here. Okay, we're going to try to add the image here. Image source, and then give it the URL. But make sure we fix it by removing the URL and just keeping the actual URL. And then giving this a class of image. And then doing dot image, basically selecting it and doing float right. What this will do, if we can change, I don't know why the font size is huge, but it's starting to annoy me. There you go. I've just moved the font size from the paragraph to the body so that everything is this size. Oh, that's a lot better. So basically what we've done is we've taken the image and we've set it to float to the right side of the text. So that's what basically float does. It floats the item or the element to either left or right. As you can see, it's floating it to the left of the content or to the right of the content. The other important thing that I wanted to cover before we get to animations, which is the last section, is selecting different elements that are nested in elements. So for example, if you have a div and you have a UL within that div, right, and then you have an li, and now we want to basically target all the LIs in that div. We would do something like div li, and that would target all the LIs inside the div. So it doesn't have to be the first li or the last li, it will be everything. If there's any li inside the div, this should target it. And if you want to target the child, so an element that exists as a child, so this one would be a child. So you would use something like, let's keep this here for now, you'd use something like greater than UL. So what this will do is it will select the UL that is the child of div, but it won't select a UL that is, for example, nested inside a, let's say, paragraph, and inside the paragraph you have a UL. It will select this right here, will select all these because they're children of the div, but it won't select UL because UL is a child of paragraph and not div, if that makes sense. Whereas div li right here will select any li that's inside a div. So this li is inside the div somewhere, and this li is also inside a div somewhere. So it doesn't have to be a child, but it will still select it. This is for child, this is for a descendant, basically. This is a descendant selector, this is a child selector. And then you also have, maybe you want to write some comments down here to remember this. Child selector, and then you have descendant selector, and then you also have adjacent selector, adjacent sibling selector. And the way you do this is you would add, say, div and then plus, and then let's say UL. So this would check for any UL that is adjacent to the div. So if you have a UL outside the div, for example, then it will make sure it selects it if it's immediately after the div. But for example, if you have two ULs, it will only select this one because it's immediately after div, and it will ignore this one. But if you want to select any UL that is a sibling of div, then you would simply do what we call a general sibling selector, and that would be div UL. So these are the other selectors that you will commonly use. And then I think the last thing that I need to cover, or I'd like to cover, is the ability to transform. So the property transform. Let's try and use it. I'm going to remove all of this. We can use it on the wrapper, so we can comment this stuff out. We can use it on the wrapper. Let me save this, and see what's on the website. So if we change this from absolute to relative, box 2, and then check, excuse me, this should work. So now we want to move box 2, for example, using the transform property. You can do something called translate, which will also move it similar to top, left, right, and bottom. But here you only give it the X and Y. So let's say we want to move it 100 horizontally and 200 vertically. I think you need to give it pixels as well, or percentages. As you can see, it's moved down here. If you do minus, it will do it the other way around. Let me give it minus 100 instead, so it should move up a bit, and it has. So that's basically translate. You can do rotate. Actually, let's keep this. I'm getting in the habit of just deleting everything I write these days. We'll keep it as minus 100, we said, and then we want to create a new one for rotate. We want to rotate this by, I think this takes a degree. I have to check, I'm not too sure. There we go. So this rotates the item by a certain degree. And you can also do scale. Again, I'm deleting. Scale. And this will take in a pixel, I think. I'm not too sure. Actually, just a number. So 2 will double it, -5 should shrink it. There you go. So that's just a different way of manipulating the elements, changing their looks. And that leaves us with one more section to cover, and that is the animations. So say we want to animate something in the website. For example, let's say we want to animate, we're going to create something new for this actually. We're going to create a div class and call it animated. I am an animated text. So we're going to try to animate this text. And first you need to create something called a keyframe or keyframes, and then you give it the name of the animation that you'd like. So I'm going to say multicolor. And then within this you will define the steps that you want your animation to take. So for me, for example, right now I'd like it to go from white, actually not white because the background is white, from red to blue to yellow to green. Red, blue, yellow, green. I just had to write that down because I might forget it. So for the first step, at 0%, I want it to go from color red, so it will start at color red, and then we have 4 colors, so we'll do 25%. At 25% bracket, I want it to be color blue, and then at 50% I want it to be color yellow, and then at 75% I want it to be color green, and then we're left with 100%. Let's do color maroon, actually purple will do. So these are basically the steps that you want your animation to take. It will go from red at 0%, 25% it will be blue, 50% yellow, 75% green, and 100% purple. Now we want to use this animation. Now that we've created it, we'd like to actually use it. And the way we'll do that is we'll use it on this text right here, or this div. So we'll do dot animated, and then there is a property that's named animated, or animation, sorry, not animated, I'm getting confused here. Animation, and this takes in the name of the animation that we want to use, which is what we defined right here. So multicolor is the name, and then the duration that you want the animation to run for. So let's say 4%, it might be too long, let's do 3%. And then it will also take in the timing function, which is usually set to linear, but you can have it to ease in, ease out, different timing functions. And then you can also add in the iteration count, so how many times you want it to run for. I'm going to put infinite. And the direction you want it to run in, so you can have it run from red, blue, yellow, green, purple, and then go back to red, blue, yellow, green, purple. But I'm going to do alternate, so it will start at red, finish at purple, and then go back from purple, green, yellow, blue, red. So it will go up, it will go down, then back up, and then down and back up. Instead of going down and then jumping back to red, it will do it gradually. It will alternate basically from top to bottom. Now if we save this, it should work. And I keep forgetting to save the HTML file, but as you can see, we've saved that, and if I just zoom in a bit, I can't zoom in anymore. Okay, but anyway, you can see the text is being animated. If I change it to 1 second, it should be a lot quicker. But that is basically how you would animate something in CSS. And I think with that, we have covered pretty much everything we need to cover, although there is one more thing. There is something called exclamation mark important, which is something that you can add at the end of any value like this to make sure that that value takes effect. So sometimes you'll write a value and you'll check the website and you'll see that for some reason it's not working, or there might be another style sheet somewhere else on the website that is overwriting your value. So to make sure that your style sheet takes precedence over the other style sheets, you will just use something like important, and then the website will know to make sure it will use your styling over the other styling. But again, this is not something that is recommended to use because there can be a lot of unexpected behavior using this, but it's just something that you should know about. I think that's it. To be honest, anything else that we need to cover, I'll make sure that we cover during the rest of the course, because we still have quite a bit to go. We still haven't tried to create a real website. We've learnt HTML, we've learnt CSS, but we haven't tried to put them together properly yet and create something that is closer to a real world example. So we will do that, and we will also pick a random website and we will try to clone it, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And then we move on to JavaScript as well. There is a good chance that we might start JavaScript first and then try to clone the website, but in any case, make sure you stay tuned. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down below and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. But yeah, you've come a long way. I'm sure this is a lot to take in, but don't worry. Like I said, this is not something that you need to memorize. You don't need to remember all of these properties. Just make sure that you understand the concepts behind them, and rest assured that you can always Google these stuff. You can always look up this stuff if you need to. And for example, these properties, sometimes I still forget the properties that I'm trying to use, the names or the spellings for them, or the values that I can apply to them. So I can always look things up, even the definitions of some of these properties. Like, just preparing for this video, I came across different properties that I've never used before, you know. So there's always room for improvement. You don't need to try and memorize all of this or keep a notebook with all of them written down, because everything is available online. This was a mistake that I did when I first started. I tried to memorize all of this, or I was getting overwhelmed by the amount of properties that are there. But at one point I was like, you know what, there's too many, there's no way I'm going to remember all of it. Let me just go and get on with it, and I will remember things as I need them, as and when I need them. And that's really how you do it. You will work with projects where you'll need some properties more than others, and you'll just improve that way. So again, don't feel overwhelmed by all of this. If you do, it will get easier as you go along the course, and your muscle memory will kick in, and you will be able to actually write this from the top of your head very soon. So just make sure you keep coding along with me, and I'll see you in the next video.